Hi again guys, and welcome to a bonus episode, in effect, of Quattroporte. Last week, of course, I said that we had the last episode with the Audi RS6, but basically I thought to myself, surely there are other vehicles which we haven't featured, not just in Quattroporte but in other series as well, that deserve a place. So I had a thorough look through the entire lineup of GT6 and found that yes, indeed, there were some extra vehicles that do deserve a place. Not just in Quattroporte, as I said, but also in series such as Super Sports. We are going to be returning to some of the older series for bonus episodes. Not all of the series, but one or two of them in particular. Now, this particular pick is for a total sleeper vehicle, and this vehicle is of course featured in two separate dealerships, Nissan and Infiniti. Under the Infiniti dealer it's called the G20, and in the Nissan dealer, of course, the Primera. Now, this vehicle is not exactly the most eye-catching of sedans, and I personally prefer the Infiniti version because as far as supporting manufacturers go, I will often, if not always, choose to support the smaller manufacturer. So in other words, I would choose to represent Infiniti more than Nissan. Even though I don't necessarily prefer Infiniti, I just think it's cooler to represent a company that's so small in comparison to Nissan, on the game at least. Now, this particular vehicle has a decent spec. It's not amazing, it's not going to blow the doors off of its opposition, but it is useful under certain circumstances. Now, as I already said, this is a sleeper vehicle. It's a complete sleeper, in fact. I don't think anyone would really be threatened by this vehicle, the Nissan or Infiniti version, and as far as raw numbers, it's not bad at all. Now, the price is very, very cheap. Just under 23 grand for the Infiniti version. I can't recall at the moment if the Nissan is the same, but doubtless it is a similar price. 23 grand is really low. And for that, you get, not surprisingly, a front-wheel drive sedan. And although this isn't a big car as such, it's not necessarily a small one either. It's a decent-sized sedan. And although it's not exactly an exciting-looking car, I do actually quite like the shape of this vehicle. It's got quite a boxy, old-school look to it, kind of reminiscent of vehicles like Volvo from back in the 80s. And I like that because I'm a big fan of those old, boxy vehicles. Now, as far as spec, you get a 2-litre turbo engine, not too surprisingly, and the power, when fully tuned, sits at 381. So, as I said, it's not going to blow your mind, but it's enough, potentially, to be a decent enough, lower-level, undercover sports sedan. As far as torque, it puts out 284 foot-pounds, which again, is not bad, and the weight is really good. Now, being a front-wheel drive sedan, and technically, in effect, a Japanese one at that, the fact that it is lightweight isn't too surprising. It only weighs 1,018 kilos, and that is really, really low for a sedan. That makes it one of the lightest vehicles of this entire series, and given its size, that's pretty impressive. The horsepower per tonne is really helped by that low weight. So, because of the fact that you weigh not that much more than a tonne anyway, the horsepower per tonne doesn't drop that much from the power that you start with. This actually puts out 374 horsepower per tonne, which is not bad for a lower level sedan, especially one that only costs 23 grand. Now, as far as performance and the way it drives, as with some other sedans that I've mentioned before and other vehicles in other series as well, such as hatchbacks, there are certain vehicles which naturally are inclined towards tuning. They respond well to it because to some degree they're designed to be. Stuff like Supras, Skylines and various others, they're vehicles which work well with being upgraded. Other vehicles just aren't designed for that. Stuff like the Peugeot 307 from yesterday's B-Road Ballers series, and this vehicle to some degree, and various others as well. They're not designed to be heavily modified, they're just designed to be, in effect, normal everyday cars. They may have a bit more power, but they're still not really sporty versions. This is one of those vehicles. So although, yes, you can tune it up to more power than an Aston Martin V8 Vantage of the newer shape, it still doesn't mean it's going to deal with that power as well as another vehicle, for instance, say a hot hatch, that will be naturally better equipped to cope with that kind of power. And you can feel that for sure. It is more inclined to spin up its tyres, it's more inclined to torque steer, it does feel heavier in corners even with upgrades, because it's not a performance car, it's a normal car that you've turned into a performance car. But that being said, it deals with the power really well. It doesn't have much weight to deal with, which helps also, and overall, although the handling isn't necessarily as sharp as something like a Mazda Protege, for instance, it's not bad at all. In fact, I would say that the handling on this particular sedan is easily as good as stuff like the Vectra, the Citroen C5, the Volkswagen Bora, those lower level sedans which can be built to be pretty quick. This is a good rival to those vehicles, and in many cases it's also cheaper than those. Now, I'm sure there are people who like to use the Primera and the G20, but I don't really ever see people using this car. And although at 506 pp it's a little high for its own good, so I definitely wouldn't recommend racing it at that level, it could be a very useful vehicle, especially around say 425 to 475 pp. So although this vehicle isn't a vehicle by any means that I would recommend to everyone, of course, there are certain vehicles which I would say everyone should buy, but this is not one of them. This is, however, a vehicle for sleeper fans, that goes without saying, and also for people who are into lower PP racing and fancy trying something with a bit more power for its PP that's not an obvious choice. But that's it overall for this particular pick. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.